Hi, welcome back guys. This is your sensei, back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Naruto Had Harem in DxD World. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Naruto Uzumaki, the Jinchūriki of the new Jūbi, Kurama, who was the previous Kyuubi, was currently reflecting on the aftermath of yet another shinobi war, the fourth one to be precise. The blonde ninja, dressed in his familiar orange and black attire, with a mesh shirt beneath his unzipped jacket, bore a striking resemblance to his father. His hair framed his lean face with 2 bangs and 6 whisker-like markings. He no longer wore his head protector, as he was no longer a shinobi of Konoha, and his clothing was now intact, no longer tattered. An appealing young woman with silver hair, dressed in a maid uniform, approached him from behind, wrapping her arms around his neck. She addressed him with a sense of familiarity, acknowledging the weight of the moment they were in. Naruto sighed, closing his blue eyes as he accepted the end of an era. Despite his immense power, Naruto felt an overwhelming sense of loneliness. The sacrifices made during the war weighed heavily on him, as he could no longer be with those he loved. Many of his friends had perished in the conflict. Hinata and Neji had given their lives to protect him, alongside Shikamaru, Ino, Tenten, Shino, Kiba, and Akamaru, whose chakra had been drained by the god tree. Choji and several members of his clan had also fallen while trying to hold back the Jūbi's appendage, despite being empowered by the Kyuubi's chakra. Lee had met his end using the 7th gate against Madara, just before Guy arrived. Finally, Sakura had been killed by Uchiha Sasuke, whom Naruto had considered a brother, after Team 7 managed to seal Kaguya. In that moment of despair, Naruto resolved to unleash the full extent of his fury. For the first time in his life, he took a life, ripping out Sasuke's Rinnegan and Sharingan and replacing his own eyes with them. To his surprise, his eyes returned to their original sky blue color, and he discovered he could deactivate his Rinnegan, unlike Sasuke. After this transformation, he released the Bijou from their imprisonment caused by Sasuke's Chibaku Tensei. The Bijou, having had enough of human control, chose to enter Naruto's seal, merging with Kurama. Initially resistant, Kurama ultimately agreed to their request. Thanks to Killer Bee, who retained a small amount of Gyuki's chakra, he would not perish. The transformation did not stop there. Kurama's fur turned silver, he gained an additional tail, and his eyes evolved into Rinne Sharingan, astonishing both Naruto and the Bijou. Kurama instructed Naruto to channel chakra into his eyes, resulting in Naruto's own eyes permanently evolving into Rinne Sharingan as well. After completing this transformation, Naruto informed Kakashi, who was still mourning Sakura's death, that he had killed Sasuke and burned his body. Kakashi silently acknowledged this, understanding the necessity of Naruto's actions. Naruto was determined to prevent another psycho from reviving the Uchiha. Next, Naruto released the infinite Tsukuyomi, freeing all its victims from their dreams. The Shinobi Alliance did not inquire about Sasuke's whereabouts, except for Karin, who initially struggled to accept that Sasuke had betrayed them. However, she was ultimately convinced when Naruto revealed the truth through his Rinne Sharingan. While the group discussed their next steps, the 5 Kages approached. Naruto informed them of his decision not to join any village or return to Konoha. This revelation surprised them, as they thought he might go rogue. However, Naruto explained that he was now the Jūbi's Jinchūriki and the 2nd Rakudo Sannin. He did not wish to disrupt the world's balance and intended to travel, visiting various places as he could. Tsunade and Gaara, his godmother and fellow ex-Jinchūriki, questioned him about his dream of becoming Hokage. Naruto expressed that he had moved beyond that aspiration, realizing he had initially sought the title for recognition. His true mission was to travel the world and assist those in need, free from the constraints of village loyalty. Though Tsunade found it hard to accept that the one she considered a son would leave, she ultimately agreed to his decision and promised to maintain the alliance between the villages. The other Kages nodded in agreement, and with that, Naruto bid them farewell, setting off for the hometown of his mother, Uzushiogakure. Upon arriving in Uzushiogakure, Naruto recognized that he did not want to remain stagnant. His primary techniques were limited to shadow clones and variations of Rasengan. Therefore, he resolved to learn advanced Fuinjutsu with Kurama's guidance, who had remained within him, connected to his mother, Kushina Uzumaki, and the wife of the first Hokage, Mito Uzumaki. Kurama also aimed to help Naruto expand his jutsu arsenal, as becoming the Jūbi had not only granted him new eyes but also knowledge inherited from Hagoromo Otsutsuki. Naruto decided to create a multitude of clones to expedite their learning process. A massive cloud of smoke enveloped the ruins of Uzushio, revealing over 1,000 clones, all with blonde hair, ready to search for anything useful and begin constructing a place to stay. While the clones diligently worked, one clone remained with the original Naruto. Kurama took control of this clone and transformed it into a feminine figure with long silver hair and mismatched eyes, one sky blue and the other crimson red. She wore a long-sleeved gothic black dress with an open white collar and a black ribbon in her hair. The woman was strikingly appealing, her eyes captivating Naruto as if drawing him in. In a special dimension, Naruto and Kurama, now embodying the figure known as Luminous, observed the events unfolding in the real world. In this dimension, they could manipulate time, experiencing 1 hour inside while a year passed outside. Ida and Demon were not present with them, as Naruto desired their own personal space, keeping the couple separated in different dimensions. They could still contact each other through Naruto's special jutsu. Inside his unique dimension, both the Biju and her host observed that after the war, the samurai began to take over the work of the shinobi. Eventually, the daimyo started to fund the samurai, leading to significant changes in the world. Technology advanced, and more humans began to rely on it, a trend that continued for several millennia. However, that era came to an end due to natural disasters, which seemed to reset everything back to zero. Time passed, and the two lost track of how many years had gone by. Giant reptiles, towering as high as Konoha's Hokage monument, began to dominate the world. This era too ended with another rain of rocks from the sky, marking a time devoid of humans or civilization. More than 100 million years later, humans began to restart their era. The two noticed that some gods, sealed in Uzumaki masks, had reformed themselves and started to create life. However, none of these gods seemed to remember their past, prompting Naruto and Luminous to observe this new era with caution. The birth of Adam and Eve, created by a being referred to as God, marked the beginning of humanity's journey. Nearly 4 millennia later, a savior named Jesus Christ was born, performing many miracles before sacrificing himself for humanity's sins. As time passed, they witnessed the rise of a civilization called Mesopotamia, which thrived for around 6,000 years before its decline. After another 2,500 years, the two grew weary of merely watching, although Luminous appeared content to remain by Naruto's side. They observed God, exhausted after sealing a terrible being known as Trihexa, ultimately falling in a great war involving angels, fallen angels, and devils led by Lucifer. Luminous expressed her disdain, questioning how such a weak being could be called God. Naruto, amused, reminded her not to let power cloud her judgment. They noted the division among the factions: angels, fallen angels, and devils. Naruto decided against intervening, fearing that his presence would draw him into the conflict, especially after God's demise. Luminous agreed, recognizing the wisdom in his choice. They chose to follow the devils into the underworld while others, like Ida and Demon, investigated the angels and fallen angels. Years passed until a war erupted in the underworld between the new Satan faction and the old. Naruto lamented the inevitability of war, reflecting on the nature of all living beings and the violence that seemed to follow them. As the war unfolded, they spotted a silver-haired maid resembling Luminous defecting to the new Satan faction, pursued by a horde of devils. Luminous felt a pang of connection, asserting her unique place in Naruto's life. They continued to watch as the silver-haired devil found herself cornered by former allies turned enemies. Naruto's gaze sharpened as he recognized the old devil's intentions to toy with her before delivering a fatal blow. Understanding her MSDR's thoughts, Luminous changed into her maid attire, ready for action. With determination, they opened a portal to the location of the silver-haired devil, ready to intervene. The devil, named Graphia, steeled herself for the fight of her life, vowing to resist her pursuers. As they searched for her, Luminous expressed her frustration at not being able to locate Graphia. Naruto sheepishly admitted to forgetting to pinpoint her magical signature but soon sensed her presence. Despite not being in Sage mode, he could still detect emotions, including the negative feelings of desperation emanating from Graphia. Recognizing her commendable spirit, Luminous took Naruto's hand, and they vanished in a flash of silver light, ready to assist in the battle ahead. Graphia was making her way toward the camp of the new Satan faction when she felt an overwhelming surge of energy from the direction she had come. She paused, instinctively turning back to gauge the source of this powerful presence. Unlike the gradual buildup of magic she was accustomed to, this energy seemed to materialize from thin air, as if it had simply appeared out of nothingness. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath her feet, and cracks began to form in the earth, threatening to split it apart. Graphia fell to her knees, struggling to breathe as a sense of dread washed over her. Just as quickly as it had arrived, the energy dissipated, leaving her momentarily disoriented. She rose to her feet, convinced that whatever had happened was over, and resumed her journey. A few moments of silence passed before a loud sound erupted from the purple sky above. Graphia's gaze instinctively followed the noise, and her heart raced as she witnessed the sky splitting open to reveal massive meteorites emerging from the rift. The sight was terrifying, and she could hardly comprehend the magnitude of power that could produce such a phenomenon. This was not something any ordinary being could achieve. It was a force beyond comprehension, one that even the gods should not possess. As the meteorites hovered in the sky, glowing ominously, they began to descend slowly toward the location of the old Satan faction. Graphia felt a mix of fear and an unexpected thrill at the sight, her cheeks flushing as she hurried toward the new Satan faction, glancing back at the falling meteorites. Thoughts of Naruto filled her mind as she moved. She longed to meet him again, to understand the power he wielded. Meanwhile, at the new Satan faction's camp, a woman named Sarah was captivated by the sight of the meteorites. She turned to a red-haired man named Surzek, who had a strikingly handsome appearance. Sarah asked if she could pinch him, and upon receiving his consent, she playfully pinched his cheeks, causing him to exclaim in surprise. The conversation shifted as another man, whose hair was receding, expressed concern over the power that had caused the meteorites. He wondered who was responsible and hoped that Graphia had managed to escape before the meteorites struck. Just then, a voice called out, and Surzek turned to see Graphia approaching them. Although her maid outfit was torn in places, she appeared uninjured. Graphia informed them that she had information about the old Satan faction, but her attention was drawn to the meteorites as they neared the ground. Surzek asked if she knew who was behind the meteorites, but before she could respond, the meteorites struck the ground, shaking the underworld violently. The four lead devils quickly formed a barrier around themselves as monstrous red and black gates, taller than mountains, materialized before them. The impact of the meteorites was deafening, and the gates trembled under the force. Sarah cried out in pain, nursing her head after the shockwave. The man with receding hair questioned whether the old Satan faction had survived the attack, and Surzek admitted uncertainty. He turned to his friend Ajuka, who voiced the need to find the one responsible for the meteorites and bring them to their side before other factions could intervene. As they prepared to discuss further, a loud poof erupted from the gates, engulfing them in smoke. One by one, the gates vanished, revealing barren land behind them. The 5 major devils soared into the sky, surveying the aftermath. Surzek remarked that it was unlikely anyone could have survived the impact unless they had teleported away in time. In another part of the realm, Naruto surveyed the results of his jutsu, a technique he had adapted from Madara. The impact had transformed the landscape, flattening mountains and creating a small oasis amidst the devastation. His maid, Luminous, scolded him for overdoing it, playfully hitting him on the head. Naruto, realizing he had indeed followed her instructions to unleash his full power, grinned sheepishly. He had intended to tease Graphia, who had appeared too serious, but Luminous had other ideas. Without warning, she kissed him passionately, catching him off guard. When she returned to his body, Naruto was left stunned, the memories of their kiss flooding back to him. He felt a wave of nausea as he processed what had just happened, lamenting the strange situation he found himself in. Luminous, with a playful pout, reminded him of her promise to be his first, leaving Naruto to grapple with the implications of their encounter. Years passed, and the devils began to rebuild themselves with a new faction led by 4 powerful figures: Cerzex Lucifer, Ajuka Beelzebub, Serafal Leviathan, and Falbium Asmodeus. Among them was a devil maid who had become the queen of the new Lucifer's peerage, a system created by Satan Beelzebub that was based on chess. Luminous observed the high-class devils as they reincarnated various races into servitude, a practice that disgusted Naruto. He felt a deep aversion to the idea of forcing lives into servitude without any choice, especially when it involved dying humans or yokai. This situation reminded him of Madara, who had taken control of him before he was sealed away. Naruto suggested they observe humanity now that the devils were free from their civil war, hoping for peace among them. Before doing so, he decided to enter Beelzebub's research room to steal a chess piece and modify it for their own purposes, despite his earlier disdain for such systems. Luminous pointed out the hypocrisy in his actions, but ultimately agreed to his plan. As he stole a chess piece and infused it with his blood, he recalled how the green-haired Satan had done the same, realizing that all of Beelzebub's pieces were mutated. Chaos erupted when Ajuka Beelzebub discovered that one of his pre-made chess pieces had gone missing. The news spread quickly, warning that a rogue peerage might emerge in the future. Several hundred years later, Naruto and Luminous watched as 2 sacred gear users battled in a mountain range. One had long, wavy blonde hair and wore red armor, while the other was clad in white armor. Luminous giggled at the ongoing rivalry between the 2 dragons, Draig and Albion, which persisted through generations even after the gods had sealed them into sacred gears. Naruto noted how similar this rivalry was to that of Ashura and Indra. As he observed the fight, Naruto felt a glint of determination in his eyes. He planned to end the rivalry by claiming Draig for himself, believing that doing so would spare future generations from the conflict. He imagined the immense power he could wield with Draig and shuddered at the thought of its destructive potential. Naruto and Luminous then entered a portal to the location of a dying woman, noticing that the user of Albion was flying away, unaware of their presence. They waited until the woman took her last breath. Once she did, Naruto activated his Rinne Sharingan to scan her body for the sacred gear. He realized that removing a sacred gear was akin to granting death to its owner. With a sigh, he covered his right arm with the silver shroud of Jūbi's chakra and reached inside her body to retrieve the sacred gear. Luminous commented on their luck that the woman was already dead, but Naruto felt a pang of sympathy for her. Her life had been consumed by the rivalry between the 2 dragons. He pulled out a red sphere and stored it within his seal, noting how easy it had been. Luminous urged him to hurry if he wanted to save the girl, as her soul was on the verge of leaving her body. Years later, in a small town in Japan called Kuo, there was a ramen store named Whirling Ramen, located near a park. The store was perpetually crowded, not only because the ramen was so delicious that it sent patrons into a blissful state, but also due to the striking beauty of the cashier and the handsome chef with blonde hair and whisker marks. They were considered a perfect couple. Luminous felt humiliated handling the cashier, grumbling inwardly while forcing a smile as she gave change to a customer. Naruto, preparing to close the store for lunchtime, reminded her that she had chosen to avoid taking orders. They had been in the town for over 30 years, having created fake identities and transformed themselves until they could finally revert to their true forms. As they settled on the counter to enjoy their life, a voice interrupted them. It belonged to a policeman, a figure Naruto had been trying to avoid for a long time. Panic surged through him as he mentally cursed, while Luminous found amusement in his distress. The policeman asked Naruto how old he was, a question he dreaded. He hesitantly replied that he was 17, and when asked why he was not in school, he stammered out excuses about needing to tend to the store and earn money. The policeman seemed unconvinced, and the tension in the air thickened as Naruto braced himself for the conversation ahead. Naruto had to finish school before he could work, even though it was his parents' store. He was surprised when someone mentioned this, as it brought back memories of his childhood visits to the store, where he had overheard his parents discussing their child's attempts at making ramen. He was taken aback when Luminous, a young woman beside him, revealed that she was no longer in school at the age of 19. She had even created a graduation certificate while they were distracted. Naruto quickly turned to her, startled by her revelation, but she simply looked away and whistled innocently. Luminous suggested that she could take him to Kuo Academy to register, which made the officer present blush at her charming smile. Once the officer left, Luminous laughed at Naruto's predicament, who could only grumble in response. She affectionately teased him, and as they prepared to leave, Naruto sighed at the absurdity of attending school despite being much older than he appeared. As they walked toward Kuo Academy, they noticed that club activities were still happening, even on a Saturday. The school had recently transitioned from an all-girls institution to a co-ed one, and they overheard whispers from a group of girls nearby, speculating about their relationship. Luminous felt a twitch of annoyance at being called old, while Naruto found humor in her irritation. Approaching a girl in a school uniform, Luminous asked for directions to the principal's office. The girl informed them that the principal was unavailable on Saturdays but offered to guide them to the student council, who could assist with registration. Luminous explained their purpose, and the girl led them to the student council room, where they met Sauna Shirtorai, the diligent president. After a smooth registration process, Sauna welcomed Naruto as a new student and handed him his schedule and uniform. Grateful, Luminous bowed slightly, and they left the room, heading home. Later, Naruto felt overwhelmed as the lunch bell rang, signaling a break from classes. He slipped out of the classroom unnoticed and made his way to the rooftop, where he stretched out and sighed in relief. Luminous reminded him to make friends, but he was too mentally exhausted from the lessons to care. He took out the breakfast he had prepared earlier, lamenting how he missed ramen. As he ate, he sensed someone watching him. Turning around, he spotted a petite girl with white hair, her hazel eyes fixated on the food he held. When he offered her a bite, she eagerly accepted and sat beside him. To his surprise, after tasting the food, she transformed, sprouting cat ears and tails, a result of his infused ingredients. Realizing the implications of his cooking, Naruto chuckled at the unexpected turn of events. He decided to have a bit of fun and teased the girl about her transformation, but she quickly panicked and reverted to her normal state before running back inside the building, leaving him amused on the rooftop. After finishing his lunch, Naruto wandered the school and overheard laughter coming from the girls' club changing room. With a mischievous grin, he transformed into a female version of himself, minus his whiskers, and approached the trio of boys who were clearly up to no good. Surprising them with his appearance, he leaned in and asked what they were doing, catching them off guard. The boys, mesmerized by his beauty, stammered out excuses about playing hide and seek, clearly flustered by the unexpected encounter. Naruto reveled in the chaos he had created, ready for more mischief in his new school life. Naruto smiled brightly at the trio, who were captivated by her charm. Unbeknownst to them, she had cast an illusion as part of her playful prank. She approached them, feigning confusion about her new surroundings and asked for directions to Class 2A. The trio eagerly agreed to help her, leading her through the bustling school hallways filled with curious onlookers. Many girls wondered why such a stunning girl, who could rival the two most popular girls in Kuo, was with the trio, while the boys felt a pang of jealousy at the smug expressions on the trio's faces. Upon reaching her destination, Naruto introduced herself and handed each of them a small plastic bag. With a playful wave and a blown kiss, she bid them farewell. The trio, smitten by her gestures, waved back as they returned to their class, their minds racing with thoughts of what might be inside the bags. They speculated it could be something scandalous, perhaps even used clothing. When Naruto returned to his class after executing his prank, he was immediately bombarded with questions from the girls, who had hoped to invite him to join them for lunch. However, he had already slipped away from his seat. He apologized, claiming he was too hungry to wait, and the girls accepted his excuse, asking him to promise they would eat together next time. Just as he was about to agree, a commotion erupted outside the classroom. The trio was being chased by girls from the kendo club, who were furious and accusing them of stealing their underwear. Naruto feigned ignorance, asking the girls what was happening, but they merely shrugged, indicating that such antics were commonplace. Internally, he reveled in the success of his prank, unable to contain his amusement. A voice called out to him from behind, tapping his shoulder. He turned to see a fellow blonde, who was quite handsome, approaching him. As two figures entered the store, one of them joyfully greeted Naruto, and they quickly secured seats at the counter, joining others who had chosen their favorite tables. Naruto welcomed his friends, who had established a routine of visiting the store together for over a year. The man, known as Danasik, grumbled about his name being mispronounced, while a girl in a black maid outfit giggled at their banter. Naruto, recalling their usual orders, asked if Middle wanted vegetable ramen, to which she nodded enthusiastically. He then inquired if Danasik wanted 3 bowls of miso ramen, to which he gruffly agreed, expressing his impatience. Naruto cheerfully assured them their orders would be ready soon. As they waited, Middle asked about Naruto's first day at school. He described it as normal until he encountered a girl with cat ears and 2 tails. Their interest piqued, Middle and Danasik leaned in closer. Naruto continued, explaining how the girl had mysteriously vanished after he offered her a snack, leading to an unexpected encounter with Rias Gremory, who had invited him to her occult research club. Upon hearing Rias's name, both Middle and Danasik exchanged worried glances. They were aware of the Gremory family and the influence they held in Kuo. Naruto, oblivious to the implications, shared his decision to flee, fearing he might be sacrificed in some supernatural ritual. His reasoning elicited hearty laughter from Danasik, who found the situation amusing. Naruto's carefree attitude and humorous take on the bizarre events of his day continued to surprise his friends, who were both entertained and concerned about the potential dangers lurking in their world. Naruto had successfully navigated his life and returned home safely, continuing his passion for making ramen. The joy of the moment was infectious, and he found himself laughing heartily, a sound that echoed through the kitchen. Middle, a fallen angel, shared in the amusement, unable to contain her giggles at the chef's antics. She thought about how the Gremory heiress must be frustrated after being dismissed so easily. The two fallen angels exchanged thoughts telepathically, reveling in the humor of the situation. As Naruto prepared bowls of ramen for his customers, he noticed the absence of his friends Rainer and Kala. He inquired about their whereabouts, learning that Rainer had obligations and Kala was waiting for her return. Naruto appreciated these light-hearted conversations with his fallen friends, even though they were unaware of his knowledge about their true identities. He contemplated whether he should reveal this information to them soon. In a dimly lit room, a boy's voice expressed an apology. A table hosted a gathering of various individuals. Lilith sat closely beside Naruto, clinging to him as if her very existence depended on it. Lumina stood behind them, her annoyance hidden beneath a stern expression. Kaneko had taken a seat on Naruto's lap, wrapping her arms and legs around him. The rest of Rias' peerage was seated next to Surzex, who observed the mother of all devils behaving like a lovesick schoolgirl in the presence of the young man. Graphia stood behind the group, her irritation mirroring Luminous, though she maintained a composed facade. Naruto, curious about how to proceed, asked how they should handle the situation. Surzex took a deep breath, questioning how Lilith, the wife of the original Lucifer, could be present when she was supposed to be dead. Naruto tilted his head, squinting at Surzex, prompting a reaction from the girls who found his gesture endearing. Lilith pouted, commenting on the rudeness of the younger generation for not introducing themselves before asking questions. Surzex nervously introduced himself, revealing his identity as one of the 4 new Satans. Naruto proudly introduced himself as the owner of Whirling Ramen, claiming it to be the best ramen store in the world. His casual demeanor drew surprised reactions from those around him, especially as they imagined him patting Kaneko during a serious discussion. He continued, explaining that he had saved Lilith from a man named Rizavim and Hades, restoring her to her prime and bringing her to live with him. The group was taken aback by Naruto's nonchalant explanation, while Surzex and Graphia exchanged serious glances, realizing the implications of his words. Surzex inquired about Ryzavim and Hades, expressing concern over their potential threat. Naruto casually mentioned that both were dead, having dealt with them decisively. The revelation left Surzex momentarily speechless, grappling with the fact that such powerful beings had been easily defeated by Naruto. Naruto acknowledged his knowledge of the history of angels, devils, and fallen angels, but he also expressed curiosity about the differences in family names among the group. He playfully suggested that he had no questions about them, except for a light-hearted jab at Graphia's possible interests. This earned him playful reprimands from Luminous and Lilith, while Kaneko playfully chastised him for flirting. As the atmosphere lightened, Graphia raised her hand, prompting Naruto to turn his attention to her. He complimented her appearance, which caused her to blush while eliciting mixed reactions from the others. Rias felt a pang of jealousy, realizing that Naruto's attention was directed toward her sister-in-law instead of her. Graphia, maintaining her composure, asked Naruto about his identity. This question was on the minds of both Surzex and Rias, who were eager to understand more about the young man who had saved Graphia and possessed such formidable power. Naruto responded thoughtfully, admitting that he had been human long ago but was uncertain about his current nature. He described himself as immortal yet no longer entirely human. When asked how long it had been since his transformation, Naruto pondered the concept of time, eventually exclaiming that it had been eons. Rias, taken aback by this revelation, stood up in surprise, realizing that the man before her was essentially ancient. The concept of something older than ancient was almost unfathomable, yet it existed before them. A young man, who appeared to be only 16, had once been human. After a devastating war in his time, he had emerged transformed. At the end of that conflict, he had defeated a primordial goddess who sought to enslave humanity to protect herself from her own kind. This victory had granted him immortality while allowing him to retain his youthful appearance. Surzex and the other devils were taken aback. The man before them had participated in a war against a goddess at such a young age, a feat that even the Four Mouths had not accomplished during their youth. The meeting was tense, with Lord Phoenix, a blond man who appeared to be in his 30s, inquiring about the purpose of their gathering. He had been preoccupied with trying to instill humility in his arrogant second son, but the urgency of the meeting had drawn his attention. The Lord of House Phoenix sensed a brewing storm and had hoped to address his son's growing arrogance, but his efforts had been in vain. Surzex confirmed that a demand had been made regarding the engagement of Rias Gremory and Riser Phoenix. Lord Phoenix, along with his wife, had been searching for ways to free Rias from this marriage, feeling sympathy for the young woman. However, the elders continued to push for the union, despite the realization that the engagement had been a mistake. The demand was clear: the engagement was to be annulled, and no further marriage proposals would be made for Rias Gremory. Surzex smiled as he delivered the news, which was met with discontent from the elders, except for the three great Satans and Lord Phoenix, who felt a sense of relief. Surzex continued, revealing that Lady Lilith had also agreed with her companion, which added to the tension in the room. He displayed an image of Lilith gently petting someone's head, which was resting on the table. The elders were shocked, having believed Lilith to be dead all this time. The truth emerged: Lilith had not died but had been kidnapped by Ryzavim Riven Lucifer and subjected to experiments by him and Hades in an attempt to create more devils. The young man before them had rescued her, infiltrating Hades' territory and eliminating Ryzavim before erasing Hades' memories. A heavy silence fell over the hall as Surzex reveled in the shock of the elders. He had longed for this moment since they had forced his sister into an arranged marriage. He further warned them that Lilith had declared her longing to distance herself from the supernatural, especially from devils. He advised them against taking any action, as the young man present had single-handedly decimated the old Satan faction and created the moon, a feat confirmed by Graphia, who had been saved by him years ago. Surzex emphasized the danger posed by this individual, noting that even the combined forces of three factions would not stand a chance against him. He had defeated gods from other worlds long before the existence of God on Earth. This man predated everything known to them, and Surzex was certain that neither angels nor fallen angels were aware of his origins. Finally, he revealed that even God himself possessed only a fraction of this man's raw power. Surzex expressed his longing to form an alliance with him, warning the elders to heed his words, as he would relish witnessing their downfall should they defy him. As Surzex departed, the three Satans called out to him, seeking confirmation about the young man and Lady Lilith's intentions. Surzex greeted them with a bright smile, feeling a sense of freedom he had not experienced in a long time. He confirmed the truth of Lady Lilith's decision and the identity of the young man, who had indeed been a figure from centuries past. Graphia, who had been rivals with Seraphal for the position of Satan Leviathan, interjected, describing the young man as incredibly handsome and powerful, having conquered gods that had devoured entire worlds. Seraphal, intrigued, expressed her longing to claim him for herself, only to be reminded by Graphia that he was not someone to be possessed, as he had other companions. The revelation that Graphia was not married to Surzex sent shockwaves through the room, leaving the three Satans in disbelief as they turned to Surzex, who was now attempting to slip away. The implications of this news would undoubtedly disrupt the devil world. The balance among the three factions was a growing concern, especially with the hero of the Civil War now revealing himself alongside the lady of the underworld, who was his girlfriend. The two male Satans rubbed their foreheads, feeling the onset of headaches, particularly from the complaints of the public and the Elder Council as they tried to regain their composure. Naruto let out a long sigh after finishing the ramen he had prepared for himself and his friends from school. He dropped into an empty seat, joining the young devils. Akino, leaning on the table, noticed his demeanor and inquired if something was wrong. Kaneko had settled onto his lap, which drew irritation from Luminous and Lilith, the latter retreating to her room to check on the new girl in the family. Naruto expressed his frustration, revealing that his plans had been ruined by the events of the night, just a day after he had joined school. He had intended to pull off a grand prank, pretending ignorance of the supernatural world, and then reveal his true identity to the three factions later. However, after the night's occurrences, he felt that such a plan was no longer feasible. After the two ladies had finished with Riser, he lay on the floor, unresponsive, his mind shattered by the torment he had suffered. Naruto sighed and snapped his fingers, transporting them back to his shop. He acknowledged that Riser had brought this upon himself. Suddenly, 10 jet-black spheres began to float in a circular motion behind him. Since Mstring Shinjutsu, he no longer needed to enter his 6-paths sage mode, allowing him to create the truth-seeking orbs with a maximum limit of 10. The devils were alarmed by the ominous spheres, sensing that a mere touch could erase them from existence. One of the spheres landed in Naruto's hand and transformed into a kunai. Just as he was about to strike the broken man before him, a woman intervened, kneeling before Naruto and pleading for her son's life. Her desperate request surprised him, and the knowledge that she was Riser's mother troubled him deeply. Naruto explained that the decision was not his to make but belonged to Lilith. With tears in her eyes, Lady Phoenix raised her head and met his gaze, expressing her inability to imagine her child being killed, despite knowing he was at fault. She humbly requested his mercy. When Naruto proposed a life-for-a-life trade, she resolutely agreed, demonstrating her determination. The tension in the room escalated as Ruvel, Riser's brother, stood in shock, unable to comprehend the situation. Ravel sobbed, fearing for her mother's life due to her brother's actions. Riser's peerage watched in guilt, realizing they had not done enough to guide their king toward a better path. Other devils from various families observed Lady Phoenix's plea, agreeing that Riser's arrogance warranted punishment. They were aware that the Lady of the Underworld had no longing to engage with them and could easily command her boyfriend to obliterate them if she wished. As the elders warned that even the united powers of the three factions would be no match for her boyfriend, fear spread among the devils, who hoped none from their ranks would act foolishly against him. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and though only seconds passed, it felt like an eternity. Surzex and Graphia remained still, while Rias and the others felt sympathy for Lady Phoenix, knowing her plight stemmed from her son's actions. Luminous and Lilith remained indifferent. Lord Phoenix contemplated stepping forward, but Naruto's unexpected chuckle startled everyone. He expressed his appreciation for Lady Phoenix's actions as a parent, stating that he respected her deeply. He helped her to her feet, sharing a personal story about his own parents who had died shortly after his peerage. He emphasized the importance of family and the lengths one would go to protect loved ones. Naruto then approached Riser, placing his palm on the young man's head and channeling chakra into the sun mark. Riser groaned before losing consciousness. The devils were left speechless, astonished that Naruto had spared both Riser and his mother, contrary to their expectations. He had somehow restored Riser's mind before he passed out. Naruto reassured Lady Phoenix that her son might need some therapy but would ultimately be fine, as long as he did not repeat his previous mistakes. He glanced at Lilith and Luminous, who were clearly displeased with him, and muttered to himself about the consequences he might face. Lady Phoenix, overwhelmed with gratitude, pulled Naruto into a hug, surprising him. She repeatedly thanked him for his mercy. After releasing her, he turned to Lord Phoenix, who flinched under his gaze. Naruto encouraged him to be more assertive, leaving the elder man in a state of bewilderment as he returned to his girlfriends. The devils watched, apprehensive of the expressions on the faces of the two women, and Naruto, feeling the weight of their scrutiny, rubbed the back of his neck, uncertain of how to address the situation. The atmosphere was tense as Lilith stood with her arms folded, a determined expression on her face. She made a bold statement about the situation at hand, addressing the group with a mix of confidence and defiance. Her words caught everyone off guard, especially when she referred to herself as one of Naruto's girlfriends, dismissing any notion of being selfish or egotistical. The reaction from the others was palpable, as they were taken aback by her straightforwardness, particularly in the presence of someone as powerful as the mother of all devils. Lilith's playful demeanor took a more serious turn when she asserted her position, making it clear that she would not tolerate any disrespect towards her or her friends. She declared that the main house of the Phoenix clan would now serve her and her companions, and any insult directed at them would be met with severe consequences. She turned to Surzex, requesting that he enforce this new law, which he acknowledged with a nod. This announcement reverberated throughout the underworld and the Phoenix clan, signifying a monumental shift in power dynamics. The implications of such a declaration were immense, elevating the Phoenix clan to a status that surpassed even that of the Mao. Meanwhile, the Phoenix family gathered in their living room, aware of the recent developments through the broadcast. Ravel sat beside her brother Ruvel, while their parents exchanged glances filled with concern and curiosity. Ruvel inquired about their new role in serving Lady Lilith and her partner, seeking guidance from their father. Lord Phoenix reassured them that until instructed otherwise by Lady Lilith, they would continue their usual duties. Ravel noticed her mother's unusual demeanor, her cheeks flushed with color, prompting her to ask if everything was all right. Lady Phoenix expressed her relief that Naruto had spared Riser, even healing him against Lilith's wishes. Ravel found herself intrigued by Naruto, admiring his bravery in defying Lady Lilith. Lady Phoenix encouraged Ravel to meet Naruto, suggesting that she could act as a liaison between their family and Lady Lilith. Ravel hesitated, doubting her ability to fulfill such a role, but her mother insisted that she was the perfect choice. She also mentioned that Ravel would attend Crow Academy to better understand their society, emphasizing the importance of not being confined. As Lady Phoenix reminisced about her own feelings, she playfully advised Ravel not to use formal titles when addressing Naruto, as he preferred a more casual approach. Ravel was puzzled by this, noting her mother's use of a title. Lady Phoenix blushed, leaving Ravel to wonder about the complexities of adult relationships. Ruvel and Lord Phoenix exchanged knowing glances, acknowledging their wife and mother's infatuation with Naruto. Despite the strangeness of the situation, they respected her feelings, recognizing that devils were often drawn to power. In another part of the underworld, Sona Citri received a call from her sister, who was excitedly discussing the recent broadcast. Sona, currently in the human world, was unaware of the events that had unfolded. Her sister informed her that Rias had escaped her engagement and that the Phoenix clan had gained unprecedented status. Sona was taken aback by the news, particularly when she learned about the involvement of Lilith and Naruto. As she processed the information, she felt a mix of confusion and curiosity, especially regarding the identity of the handsome hunk her sister mentioned. The morning sun rose, and Naruto awoke slowly, feeling the warmth of Lilith curled up beside him, enjoying their peaceful moment together. The events of the previous day loomed in the background, but for now, he relished the tranquility of the morning. Naruto found himself in an awkward situation. He had a habit of sleeping without clothes, and now he desperately needed a cold shower to cool down. As he made his way down the hall to the bathroom, he snapped his fingers, expecting to be instantly clothed. However, upon sliding the door open, he was met with an unexpected sight. A girl with raven hair was already in the shower. Their eyes locked for a moment, and Naruto felt a rush of embarrassment as he realized the girl was staring at him. He quickly covered himself and apologized loudly before rushing out of the bathroom, his heart racing. He had forgotten that he had allowed his friends to stay over for the night. With another snap, he was dressed in his school uniform, but the discomfort lingered, as he felt unsettled from the encounter. Later that afternoon, the store opened earlier than usual since Naruto didn't have school that day. He was on high alert, knowing that the policeman who had insisted he attend school might show up for lunch. His friends from the Fallen group arrived, but this time they were accompanied by a short blonde girl dressed as a nun. The serious expressions on his friends' faces hinted that something important was about to unfold. Danasik, one of the Fallen, addressed Naruto with a sense of urgency. They had chosen to reveal themselves to Naruto to avoid alarming the nun, who might have heard unsettling stories about them. Naruto nodded and sent one of his clones to take over the cooking while they moved to the second floor. There, they found Lilith engrossed in a video game on a large television, Ophis quietly reading in a corner, and Rimu happily devouring an endless supply of food. The guests looked to Naruto for an explanation, noticing the sheepish expression on his face as he rubbed the back of his head. He felt a mix of nerves and excitement, knowing he also had something to share with them. Suddenly, a small table and chairs appeared, surprising both the Fallen and the nun. Drinks and snacks materialized in front of them, and Naruto took a deep breath to begin. He started by expressing his guilt for not sharing his past sooner, especially since the devils had already learned about him. With a sigh, he introduced himself as Naruto Uzumaki, a human who had existed long before the concept of God and had lived for an extensive peerage. He recounted how he had faced and defeated powerful beings who claimed to be gods, explaining that they were far more formidable than the deity worshipped in biblical texts. As he spoke, the room fell silent, the gravity of his words sinking in. He elaborated that these so-called gods had only grown stronger after conquering various worlds, and he had been involved in sealing away a primordial goddess who had sought to dominate humanity. The nun listened intently, still processing the information. Another hand raised, this time belonging to Middlet, who seemed both nervous and curious. She asked why Naruto had never mentioned his knowledge of their true nature as non-humans. Naruto chuckled, his friendly demeanor easing the tension in the room. He explained that he simply wanted to be their friend, regardless of their backgrounds. He continued, sharing how he had formed bonds with Ophis and Rimu, emphasizing the importance of understanding and friendship over their differences. The room filled with a sense of camaraderie as he acknowledged the growth he had seen in his friends, noting how their darker tendencies had diminished since they had spent time together. The nun, still absorbing everything, was left astounded by Naruto's openness and the connections he had fostered among such diverse beings. This man, though not a follower of God, achieved more than many of her fellow believers. She admired this kind of person, someone who could befriend a fallen and guide them toward a better life. Her aspiration was to help others, regardless of their differences. Naruto firmly decided against entering the lingerie store, crossing his arms in a gesture of refusal. He offered to lend his stuffed animal, Gamachan, to one of the girls while he waited on a bench in the park. Lilith, initially pouting, eventually agreed and entered the store with Asia, who felt a slight blush on her cheeks. Although relieved that Naruto was not accompanying them, she felt sympathy for her fellow blonde. As Naruto strolled through the park, he spotted an ice cream truck. After rummaging through his pockets for a few hundred yen, he found enough for 2 ice creams but opted to buy just one. He then settled onto a bench to relax while waiting for the 2 girls. His unique appearance, marked by whisker-like scars on his cheeks, drew the attention of several young women and mothers visiting the park with their children. Suddenly, a feminine figure approached him from behind, playfully covering his eyes. She teased him with a flirtatious tone, revealing herself as Kuroka, who had unexpectedly appeared. She wore a black kimono that left little to the imagination, showcasing her figure and playful demeanor. Unlike Kaneko, who concealed her cat ears and tails, Kuroka embraced her identity, believing that onlookers would think she was simply cosplaying. Naruto acknowledged Kuroka's presence and inquired about her well-being. She expressed her fondness for him, missing his warmth. He affectionately called her his little kitten, despite her protests that she had grown up. Their playful banter continued, with Kuroka insisting she was no longer a kitten, while Naruto maintained his view. As they enjoyed their time together, Kuroka liked the remnants of ice cream from Naruto's fingers, causing him to blush. She inquired about his solitary presence in the park without Lumi-sama, the Biju. Naruto explained that Lumi was busy tending to the store with his clones and teaching a new girl named Rei some life skills. Kuroka's surprise at the mention of Rias Gremory was palpable, and she leaned in closer to Naruto, their proximity causing him to instinctively glance down at her. Noticing his gaze, Kuroka teased him, prompting a flurry of attention from nearby families. The playful atmosphere shifted as Kuroka playfully acknowledged the onlookers, adjusting her kimono and returning to her comfortable position on Naruto's lap. Meanwhile, in a different part of the world, Yasaka apologized for the delay in meeting Surzex and Leviathan. Surzex, observing the surroundings, noted the absence of any lingering sense from previous activities. He expressed confusion over a recent incident where he had been intoxicated by chakra, unable to recall the events leading up to it. Yasaka brought up the treaty conditions that had been sent to her, confirming the existence of a human who had lived before God and was now residing in Kuo. She emphasized the need to meet this individual before making any decisions regarding the treaty. Concerns were raised about the potential dangers of having such a powerful being as a pillar of peace, questioning whether he might one day turn against them. Graphia, Surzex's maid, interjected, passionately defending Naruto's character. She recounted her own experiences, highlighting how he had saved her during the Civil War and reaffirming that he was not someone who would betray his word or misuse his powers. The other Satan nodded in agreement, recognizing the truth in her words and the importance of Naruto's role in their ongoing discussions. Yasaka observed the female Satan with curiosity, raising an inquisitive brow. She sensed a hint of admiration in Seraphal's demeanor towards a certain individual. Seraphal, with a playful pout, admitted her feelings, which intrigued Yasaka even more. She wondered if she might have the opportunity to meet this person, especially if her companions agreed. Seraphal giggled, revealing that Yasaka had already encountered him. She described him as cuter than he appeared on the broadcast, mentioning the whiskers on his cheeks and his sun-kissed yellow hair, which suited him well. Yasaka, trying to recall the details, felt a sense of confusion. Seraphal reminded her of a moment when she and Kuroka had been affectionate towards him. Surzex, maintaining a calm demeanor, suggested that Yasaka should ask her attendant about Naruto's whereabouts after he had been restrained. Despite his easygoing nature, he felt a twinge of concern about how Naruto might react to the situation. Yasaka quickly summoned one of her attendants, who knelt before her, and inquired about Naruto's fate. The attendant informed her that the guards were preparing for his execution in the main garden. Realizing the implications of this news, Yasaka's expression paled, and she rushed out of her room towards the garden. Surzex muttered under his breath, lamenting the potential fallout for the Yukai faction, even though he knew Naruto would likely survive. As the atmosphere thickened with tension, Seraphal turned to Graphia, sensing something was off. Graphia, feeling a shift in Naruto's energy signature, expressed her concern that this was not his doing. Surzex urged everyone to head to the main plaza immediately. Meanwhile, in the main plaza, a crowd of Yukai chanted for the execution of the so-called criminal. Naruto found himself chained beneath a guillotine, a sight he had not encountered in quite some time. He protested his innocence, declaring that Yasaka had made him her mate, but the crowd dismissed his claims, insisting he was lying. Naruto, observing the crowd's one-track mindset, felt a mix of amusement and frustration. He noted the absurdity of the situation, especially when one of the yokai, resembling a combination of Guy and Lee, stood beside him. As he attempted to hold back laughter, he asked the yokai about his peculiar eyebrows, which only served to irritate the executioner further. Just as the yokai prepared to execute him, a powerful energy surged through the area. Naruto sensed the presence of Ophis, and a moment of dread washed over him. Suddenly, a pillar of light descended upon the execution platform, disintegrating it without harming the surrounding yokai. As the light faded, Naruto realized that his clothing had also vanished, leaving him exposed. In the aftermath, the blonde Kyuubi looked at him with a mix of fear and a hint of blush, her gaze lingering on his form. Later, after calming the two devils, Naruto returned to the conversation at hand. Surzex inquired about how Naruto had managed to defeat a formidable foe in the past. Naruto, with a playful glint in his eye, acknowledged the underlying concern about his potential as a threat. He assured them that he would do anything to protect those he cared about. He recounted the tale of how they had faced the Jūbi, explaining that their enemy had absorbed it and become its Jinchūriki. He clarified that the term Jinchūriki referred to those who housed tailed beasts within them. As he continued, he revealed that they had not truly defeated the Jinchūriki. Instead, she had been transformed into the primordial goddess by her own will. Naruto summoned a vision, displaying two men from the past. One had a third eye on his forehead, while the other was enveloped in a dark entity. He explained that the dark entity was the will of the primordial goddess, known as Black Zetsu, and the man with the third eye was Madara, a former adversary who had been used to revive Kaguya. As the scene unfolded, they witnessed Madara's transformation into a pale-skinned woman with striking features, long white hair, and a third eye on her forehead, signifying her nobility. The revelation left them in awe, deepening their understanding of the complex history surrounding Naruto and the forces he had faced. She wore a high-collared hankimono adorned with intricate gold and purple lines, featuring tomo patterns running down the center and edges of the gown. As Naruto observed her, he found himself captivated by her beauty. He reflected on how striking she was upon seeing her again. Surzex, noticing Naruto's admiration, playfully inquired whether Naruto had a preference for silver-haired women, recalling that both his maid and the woman before them shared that trait. Naruto, taken aback, admitted that he did not have such a preference. He simply spoke his mind, often being told he was too honest for his own good. The silver-haired maid beside him chuckled, warmed by his compliments. Surzex teased Naruto about his appearance, pretending to be hurt by the suggestion that he looked girly. Meanwhile, Ophis, unable to take her eyes off the appealing woman, asked about her strength. Naruto offered to let them feel her power, but when he attempted to demonstrate, they felt nothing. Confused, they looked to him for an explanation. He clarified that Kaguya's power existed on a different plane, making it imperceptible to them. He compared their current dimension to a classification system, explaining that while they could sense his power, Kaguya's was beyond their comprehension. As they continued their conversation, Naruto revealed that his base power was in a higher dimension, which was why they could not gauge his true strength. He explained that during his encounter with Kaguya, he had been weaker than her, and they had ultimately sealed her away in a different dimension within the moon. Later, Naruto and Ophis strolled through a bustling festival near the Yasaka shrine, enjoying various foods. Ophis, perched on Naruto's shoulders, delighted in her cotton candy. Naruto mused about the origins of the shrine, and Ophis confirmed that it had come first. The festival was lively, filled with yokai mingling among humans, blending seamlessly into the crowd. Naruto pointed out the peaceful interactions, noting that this was the result of harmony between the two races. Ophis expressed her uncertainty about this coexistence, revealing her longing for quietude but admitting that the atmosphere was not unpleasant. As they enjoyed the festivities, Ophis inquired about Naruto's friend, Sasuke, and the mixed emotions he had expressed toward him. Naruto reflected on the complexities of his past, explaining how Indra Otsutsuki had attempted to take control of Sasuke to kill him. He shared the tragic circumstances surrounding Sakura's death, emphasizing that Sasuke had not acted of his own volition. Ophis listened intently, pondering why Naruto chose to share his life story, even if it had been altered in the manga. Naruto explained that people often fear what they do not understand. He acknowledged that various factions, including angels, devils, yokai, and humans, would fear him due to his mysterious background and immense power. However, he believed that by sharing his story, he could help alleviate some of that fear, allowing others to see him as human rather than a threat. Their contemplative moment was interrupted when a group of yokai rushed past them. Naruto recognized one of them as Guy, a turtle yokai, who called out for help. Guy bowed before Naruto and Office, urgently explaining that Yasaka's daughter had been kidnapped by members of the hero faction. Understanding the gravity of the situation, Naruto prepared to assist in the rescue. Naruto was determined to find the missing girl. Inside his mind, Lumi expressed her anger, urging him to take ruthless action against those responsible for the kidnapping. She didn't care about the consequences, she wanted them to suffer for taking a child of the Kyuubi. Naruto, after a moment of contemplation, confirmed his intent to confront the kidnappers. He had always despised the act of kidnapping, having narrowly escaped it himself as a child, thanks to his ex-fiancée and her friends. He felt a strong obligation to rescue Kunu. He received instructions about the hero faction, a group he had once recruited to help him deal with a powerful threat. The members of this faction possessed sacred gears, and he was advised to extract them before dealing with them. With a cold determination, Naruto's demeanor shifted, and he vanished in a flash of white light, leaving the turtle yokai in a state of shock. The yokai realized he had underestimated Naruto's resolve and feared the consequences of his actions. Earlier, the turtle yokai had been discussing the kidnapping plan with his companion, Yasaka. They had intended to abduct the Kyuubi, but with the devils present, they decided to target her daughter instead. As they waited for their allies, Naruto's sudden appearance caught them off guard. In a swift and brutal motion, he attacked, leaving the female member of the hero faction in disbelief as she realized she was fatally wounded. In a flashback to a time before the Great War, Naruto expressed his longing to revisit a dimension he had created long ago. He felt he had gained enough knowledge to make improvements for the sake of humanity. His tenant, who was lounging beside him, agreed to accompany him. Upon entering the portal, they were surprised to find a black dragon sleeping in a circle, its tail in its mouth. Lumi was eager to engage, while Naruto was perplexed by the dragon's presence. When the dragon awoke and demanded to know who had disturbed its slumber, Naruto introduced himself and Lumi, explaining that they were the creators of the dimension. The dragon, claiming it had no name, was taken aback by the sudden influx of knowledge imparted by Naruto's Shinjutsu, which allowed it to understand their language. As tensions rose, Lumi's powerful aura intimidated the dragon, causing it to tremble. Naruto, sensing the dragon's fear, calmed Lumi down and reassured the dragon that it was merely a newborn unfamiliar with its emotions. The dragon, relieved, was intrigued by the idea of having a name. Naruto suggested Ophis, the Ouroboros dragon, inspired by the dragon's unique sleeping position. Although Lumi scoffed at the name, the dragon found it appealing and appreciated the meaning behind it. Curious about its new identity, Ophis engaged in conversation about the significance of names and expressed interest in taking a human form. After learning about humans from Naruto, Ophis transformed into a human girl with black hair and pointed ears, creating her own clothing. However, Naruto deemed her outfit inappropriate and provided her with a simple, modest black dress, which she accepted with satisfaction. Naruto found it amusing to see Ophis adjusting to her new form, noting how strange it felt for her to walk on such tiny feet. He reassured her that she would eventually get used to it. Luminous, who had a smug expression from winning Ophis over to take on a girl's form, seemed to revel in the moment. Naruto couldn't help but tease Luminous about never letting this victory go. Curious about Ophis's experiences in this dimension, Naruto asked if she had ever eaten anything, to which she nodded. With a flick of his wrist, he conjured an ice cream and handed it to her, demonstrating how to eat it. However, Ophis, overwhelmed by the new and delightful flavor, took a big bite and experienced a brain freeze for the first time, prompting laughter from both Naruto and the Biju. When Naruto suggested making changes to the dimension, Ophis declined, expressing her fondness for it just as it was. He respected her wishes, acknowledging that it was her home now. After their visit, Office settled down for a long sleep in the cozy bed Naruto had provided, finding it fluffy and comfortable. Later, Naruto was taken aback when Office unexpectedly appeared in his dimension, revealing that someone had taken her home. It seemed she had sensed both his and Luminous' unique life signatures and teleported to him. The scene shifted to a rather chaotic moment where two Satans were crying like children, their tears staining their clothes, while Yasaka and Graphia maintained a more dignified demeanor despite their own tears. Naruto quietly took a seat, with Kunu on his lap and Office perched on his shoulders. As Office began to read a volume that had been scattered across the floor, Kunu curiously asked what her mother was reading. Naruto was startled by Kunu's innocent slip of calling him Papa. She quickly apologized, explaining that his comforting presence made her feel at ease. He knelt before her, assuring her that it was okay to call him that, even if he wasn't her biological father. Kunu's eyes sparkled with joy as she leaped into his arms, enveloped in his warmth. As they shared this tender moment, Naruto felt a sudden rush of embarrassment when Luminous made a rather bold comment in his mind about wanting to have children with him. Trying to redirect the conversation, he nervously mentioned that the volume contained stories from his childhood. Kunu expressed interest in reading it, but he hesitated, explaining that his past was not particularly pleasant. He fabricated a story about there being only 9 yokai who were afraid of them back then. Kunu, displaying her cleverness, correctly guessed that he had once been the Kyuubi before becoming the Jūbi. Naruto affectionately tousled her hair, and she leaned into his touch, clearly enjoying the moment. Yasaka, noticing the bond between Naruto and her daughter, approached them, intrigued by their laughter. Kunu excitedly recounted one of Naruto's pranks, which elicited a giggle from Yasaka. Leaning closer to Naruto, she playfully whispered to him, hinting at her affection. Naruto felt a shiver run down his spine as Yasaka's playful gesture caught him off guard, turning his cheeks a bright shade of red. Kunu, observing the interaction, tilted her head in confusion, prompting Yasaka to explain that she was simply showing Naruto some affection. In a surprising turn, Kunu declared her intention to give Naruto affection as well, catching him off guard with a sudden kiss. This unexpected display of affection elicited shocked reactions from both Yasaka and Office. Just then, Graphia appeared, startling Naruto. She expressed her feelings of being left behind as she watched other women and girls flock to him. In a bold move, she kissed him, deepening the moment as Naruto reciprocated. The kiss was intense, and Graphia felt a rush of emotions, realizing she could no longer hold back her feelings. As the kiss deepened, Naruto found himself lost in the moment, unaware of the growing tension around them. Her heart raced as she ventured into uncharted territory. Graphia felt a sense of specialness from the kiss she shared. From the first moment she laid eyes on him, she was captivated by his protective nature toward his maid, finding it endearing. When he gifted her a moon as a parting gift, her heart raced even faster. After a long separation, seeing his face again filled her with butterflies. The devil maid understood that this was the kind of happiness her king had found. Both mother and daughter were taken aback as they witnessed the maid and Naruto sharing a kiss. This unexpected display drew the attention of the Satans away from their manga. Seraphal shouted in excitement, while Surzex smiled at the sight of his queen kissing the blonde. He had been waiting for this moment for hundreds of years. After Graphia had rejected him, he had moved on and found happiness, wishing the same for his queen. Until last night, Naruto had been elusive, but now their connection also informally solidified the alliance between Naruto and the devils. It was around 4 in the afternoon when Naruto entered his home's living room, cradling a sleeping Kuroka in his arms. Lilith greeted him warmly, noting Kuroka's presence. Naruto confirmed that Kuroka would be staying with them, but he noticed the glare from Kaneko, Kuroka's sister. Kaneko jumped into Naruto's embrace, asking if he had any plans for the day. He explained that they had come directly to see Rei, as Rias had requested. Kiba, who had been nearby, informed them that Rias and Akino were in Rei's room, playing dress-up. Naruto chuckled at this and expressed his gratitude to Kiba for the update. He encouraged Kiba to take his time to think about his goals, reminding him that he was not alone and that Rias and the others were there to support him. Kiba nodded appreciatively before returning to watch Lilith play a video game, finding inspiration in it. Ophis had jumped down from Naruto's shoulders and left for her room, seeking some quiet. Kaneko, curious about her sister's state, asked why Kuroka was unconscious. Naruto explained that Kuroka had used senjutsu, sense his chakra, and had become overwhelmed. Kaneko agreed to help him carry her sister to her room, and they passed by Rimu, who was still eating. Suddenly, Rias, Akino, and Rei emerged from Rei's room, with Rei dressed as a character from a video game. Naruto was momentarily speechless at the sight. Rei looked stunning, resembling a porcelain doll. She wore a high-slit black turtleneck dress that allowed for a wide range of movement, adorned with lace patterns and crow feather sleeves. The dress opened at the back, revealing her shoulder blades, and she wore thigh-high garter stockings with black leather boots. Both Naruto and Kiba were astonished by Rei's appearance. Naruto felt a rush of determination to improve himself against such striking outfits. Rei smiled as she noticed Naruto's gaze fixed on her. Rias encouraged Rei to demonstrate what she had learned, and Rei placed her hand over her chest, expressing her readiness for orders, despite lacking weapons. Naruto, still in awe, began to create a weapon for her based on the schematics Rias provided. When he realized that Rei used a spear and sword, he grinned and presented her with a true Longinus, a powerful weapon he had acquired after defeating a group that had attempted to kidnap a child. Rias and her peerage were wide-eyed with surprise at the revelation of the weapon's significance, and Naruto mentioned that he possessed several other powerful items as well. The story began shortly after the clone discovered Diodora. It was a brief yet significant moment in the unfolding narrative. Everything has a beginning, including the apocalypse itself. Many years had passed since it was sealed by a being referred to as God, a seemingly insignificant deity that had managed to catch it off guard and confine it at the end of the world. However, this God made a critical mistake. It did not completely seal the consciousness of the entity. This allowed it to briefly perceive and sense the happenings on the planet. At that moment, it could see, feel, and hear 5 beings standing before its seal. One of them was unconscious, belonging to a foul race that it had once decimated. The other 2 were its kin, born from the same origin, while the final 2 were strikingly familiar. They emanated the same essence as its birthplace. A golden-haired man, marked with whisker-like birthmarks on his cheeks, stood beside a woman with platinum-colored hair, both positioned in the midst of its kin. The male's voice resonated within the entity, soothing the rage that had built up over years of seeking revenge against the race that had imprisoned it. The kin referred to the man as Papa, a term that was unfamiliar to the entity. It pondered why its kin would call him that. The woman's response provided clarity, revealing that they were in a gap and that they were, in fact, their children, born in that gap, making them part of the family. The concept of family was new to the entity, but it found the notion appealing. It observed the 4 beings laughing, though one with black hair maintained an impassive expression. This was how family was meant to behave, and it wondered if their purpose in coming was to liberate it from the seal. The answer arrived swiftly as it felt a powerful surge of energy that caused its knees to buckle. The male, identified as Papa, was filled with anger before calming himself. He declared that if Trihexa was their child, they needed to break the seal, emphasizing that a family does not abandon anyone. The conversation shifted to the possibility of having another daughter, a notion that delighted the female, referred to as Mama. She expressed her longing for a large family, and though the entity could not hear her whisper to Papa, it sensed his shyness in response. Before it fully comprehended the situation, the seal binding it was shattered by Papa. The sensation of release was palpable. Every supernatural being across the world felt the disturbance: angels, devils, yokai, fallen angels, gods and goddesses, both young and old. They sensed that something dreadful had been unleashed once more. The angels, in particular, felt the weight of 2 immense killing intent directed toward heaven. Those who were old enough to recognize it understood to whom this killing intent belonged. As feared, a massive screen materialized in the air for all supernatural beings to see, projecting images into their homes, palaces, and realms. The sight instilled a deep fear within them. Two human figures were seated on a royal red couch. The blonde-haired male was familiar to many, while the female was only recognized by those who had encountered her before. Behind them loomed three colossal beings, and recognition washed over the onlookers as they identified Ophis, Great Red, and Trihexa. Naruto could sense the fear radiating from the world around him. It was a good feeling, a lesson for those who had dared to meddle with his children. Perhaps this would nullify any political machinations they had devised in his absence. A malicious smile crept across his face as he stood from the couch, contemplating the lengths he would go to for his family. Luminous noticed the atmosphere of fear but chose to remain silent, relishing the sensation. It had been a long time since she had felt such dread directed at her. She addressed the world, greeting every living being on the planet. Meanwhile, a voice called out, recognizing the figures on the screen. The response indicated that they had not been seen since their time in the elemental nations, and it was time for a reunion. The first speaker grunted in acknowledgement, noticing a short blonde-haired young woman with red eyes trembling in fear at the sight of the screen. The suggestion was made to invite her along, as they prepared to confront the unfolding events. Valerie Teeps felt a rush of anxiety as she learned about the plan to visit her sister's crush. Her eyes widened in disbelief, and she shook her head vigorously. Ida, her sister, observed her reaction with a sigh, reminding Valerie that backing down would not make her a strong leader for her faction. Ida reassured her that Naruto was approachable, as long as she did not threaten anyone he cared about. Despite her apprehension, Valerie hesitated, struggling with her fears. Ida, noticing Valerie's distress, rolled her eyes and addressed her again. Valerie timidly asked if they could visit Naruto when the three most powerful beings were not present. The thought of facing them all at once was overwhelming for her. Ida, seeing how anxious Valerie was, eventually agreed to her request, understanding that the girl was nearly paralyzed by fear at the thought of encountering such formidable opponents. As the scene shifted, the atmosphere darkened ominously, as if something was blocking the sun. A heavy darkness enveloped all realms, preventing any light from breaking through. A voice echoed, taunting those who had feared his daughters, known as the Beast of the Apocalypse, Infinite Dragon, and Great Red. The speaker revealed himself, his eyelid lifting to expose a terrifying red eye adorned with spirals and tomo. The sight sent shockwaves of horror through everyone present, and they screamed in terror. The blood-red eyes, spinning hypnotically, instilled fear in all realms, while Naruto and his daughters reveled in their dread. In a moment of confrontation, Naruto expressed his fury over the actions of a so-called god who had attacked his daughter out of fear. He declared that the attack had been a desperate act, motivated by the overwhelming power she possessed, which eclipsed that of the divine figure. The pressure of his anger weighed heavily on everyone around him, causing Zenobia to collapse to her knees. The priests, nuns, exorcists, and disguised angels were not spared from the chilling aura of Naruto's killing intent. Many succumbed to fear, while others attempted to assist them, only to faint under the strain. In another tense exchange, Naruto warned Azazel that any further attempts to pursue his wife would result in the destruction of his faction. He demanded the White Dragon, threatening to annihilate Azazel's faction along with its current wielder if his demands were not met. Azazel's face drained of color at the threat, while Valiana clenched her teeth in response. Naruto informed them that searching for the Red Dragon's host in the current time was futile, revealing a gauntlet that appeared in his left hand. Albion, sensing the gravity of the situation, felt a chill as he realized he could no longer feel Drake. Naruto confirmed that he had dealt with the dragon, and Albion's fate would be no different if he did not comply. The ultimatum was clear. Albion's life was intertwined with that of his host, and the destruction of either would lead to the demise of their entire faction. The stakes were high, and the outcome uncertain as the tension in the air thickened.